Hello, it's 5:50. And we're here answering your questions. If you got any, or to talk, or whatever, before the stream starts, we're just gonna check in, make sure the stream is running as expected. There's you. What is that, Botrix? Hey, there's Botrix. Okay, we seem to be up and running on Restream. And we are up and running. On X. Twitch, there we are. YouTube, we are there. And Dick. All right. We are rocking and rolling. Let's talk about our schedule. Hey, let's go ahead. Show you that schedule. Realized I forgot to do something. I forgot to turn on a light, so I look pretty. All right, let's go here. Look at our schedule. Hey, Driver Manzer weekly schedule coming up on, well, today we're doing spiritual truth, the existential crisis. And Monday we're doing man's truth, master masculine vulnerability, attractor repel women. And Tuesday, we're taking over the world, a series looking at different ideology or items that want to take over the world. Wednesday, women's truth, duty sex, reframing, redefined for a successful marriage by the Happy Wife School. Thursday, relationship truth, the 3 requirements of a good relationship by the School of Life. Then we'll recap all our videos. And then we're going to do science truth on Saturday, the 4 quadrants, the map of all knowledge and human experience by the living philosophy. Then on Sunday, we're going to make a case and do something a little different. We'll give you spiritual truth, but we're going to make a case for remembering best efforts of people. Yeah, that's our upcoming weekly schedule. Yeah. Hopefully you see something, pique your interest. Sorry. I had dinner just before I started stream and needed to do a quick floss. So that's why I was quiet there for a moment. Let's show you some of our new artwork here. We're going to be going with this new design. Believe what is most true, Travis Menzer. And the reason why it's most true is because as we go along and time unfolds, we learn more and more new things that change what we thought was true as we go along through time. So, although what we thought was true might not be as true as something we find out in the future. There's lots of things, there are lots of situations where we've learned much more in the future. So, that's what we're going to be doing.
Raise your fist in the air.
And today, we're talking about spiritual truth. And we're going to be talking about this video put out by Alex O'Connor, the Existential Crisis Iceberg. And if you would like to learn more, I'll throw that link out. But here is alexoconnor.com, and you can subscribe to get more information about philosophy, religion, ethics, and politics. And the Within Reason podcast. Yeah. So, definitely want to promote such a awesome content creator, Alex O'Connor. We'll mention that page again. Okay, we are starting in, I don't know, 2 minutes. Do 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 do. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, tonight this is gonna be a pretty deep episode. So if you have any comments or questions, let me know. We'll stop the show and dive in and research anything that you might have questions about. I can tell by the old hash marks on the wall, it's time for us to go live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's stream, January 12th, 2025. Woo! If you're new here, I'm Menzer, and this is where explore thought-provoking ideas to uncover deeper truths. Our motto: believe the most true. Today we're diving into a fascinating topic: the existential crisis. Iceberg. This video by Alex O'Connor unpacks the many layers of existential thought, from surface level worries to the deepest philosophical dilemmas. Get ready for some big questions and even bigger insights. Yeah, so let's see how we go here. So, what we'll do is we'll get started here. Okay, so why this video? The existential crisis iceberg perfectly aligns with today's theme of spiritual truth. Their creator, Alex O'Connor, is known for their thoughtful breakdowns of complex ideas. They've done an incredible job visualizing how our existential crisis evolve and deepen. Let's dive in. As we watch, feel free to share your thoughts in chat. I'd love to hear your take on this. Let me know what you think the key points are as we go, and we'll discuss them at the end. All right. So with that, let's check out the video. Oh, yes. First, Alex Connor. Let's check out, I mentioned it in the lead up, but if you'd like, you can go to Alex. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, not. My screening's a little lower or something. It's alexoconnor.com, and there you can sign up for his list and his website. It's an awesome, I'd recommend. He's an awesome thinker and has some top-notch content. The video that we are looking at is the existential crisis iceberg, and it's by Alex O'Connor. How come that's not? I know. I gave that a thumbs up. Why didn't it stay there? Bad thumbs up. All right, let's fire it up. Here we go.
Sometimes and rarely, I'm on TikTok. And not long ago on that app, I came across the so-called existential crisis iceberg. Now, as far as I can tell, this was originally posted on Reddit by a user called Cosvic into r/iceberg charts. I don't know if they made it, they were just reposting it, but the version on TikTok has over 5 million views and 500,000 likes. So it's obviously captured some people's imagination, and I thought we could take a look. We start at the top of the iceberg with everyone has their own complex life. This doesn't seem like an entirely radical realization, but it's a common enough revelation that it has a name. They call it Sonder, which is defined by one website as the profound feeling of realizing that everyone, including strangers passing in the street, has a life as complex as one's own, which they're...
Ooh. Okay. That's a pearl. Oh, yeah. Okay. Sunder. Okay, we're going to write that down. So, actually, how can I do this? Maybe what I'll do, I'm just trying to think on the fly. What I want to do is create a list of some of the ideas in these videos. Okay, not sure. I'm just experimenting right at the moment. Just trying to grab some details here. Oops, that didn't work. All right, let's go there. Right. So this idea was called Sunder. The realization that everyone around you has a complex life. Okay. Cool. Hey, that's point one. Go some more.
Constantly living despite one's personal lack of awareness of it. Like I say, this isn't super revolutionary on the surface. Everybody knows that you're not the only character in this play, but we do almost always feel like the main character. And we kind of forget that to everybody else, even to our closest friends, we are just accessories to their life. We're side characters to their play. It's quite profound when you really sit with it for a while and realize that this world is just brimming with conscious experience, most of which you'll never even know about, let alone get to engage with, much less experience. Next, worry about future. Again, very straightforward. You start to realize that there are things in life that matter. When you grow out of your childhood, you realize that you can't spend all day long just thinking about your next meal or who you're going to play with at lunchtime. No, you've got to think about things like taxes and owning a house and all of that kind of fun stuff. And it's clear to see how this can lead to an existential crisis, especially when this goes wrong. Doesn't really require much more explanation, so I think we'll just move on. Okay, so now we're on the next level, on the tip of the iceberg. Simulate.
Worrying about the future. Do we need to do anything with it? I don't think so.
Simulation theory. You'll almost certainly have heard of this. It's the idea that we could all just be living in a simulation. This is something of a modern take on René Descartes' evil demon hypothesis. And Descartes' way of entertaining this idea is to imagine that there's an evil demon who's constantly deceiving us into thinking that the world around us exists in the way that it does, but in fact it doesn't, and we're all just being deceived all the time. A modern take on this is the idea that we're living in a simulation. You think that you're in a real world with real people and real objects, but actually you're in a computer simulation and your brain is just being prodded electronically to produce fake experiences. And this is broadly known as radical skepticism. If it can be
Radical skepticism.
questioned, then we should question it, and we begin to realize that we basically have no justification even for some of our most foundational beliefs, like the existence of the external world. And just thinking that this is possible.
Hey, how did he describe radical acceptance?
Broadly known as radical skepticism. If it can be questioned, then we should question it, and we begin to realize that we basically have no justification even for some of our most foundational.
Okay, so radical skepticism, if it can be questioned, then it should. Okay, cool idea.
Beliefs like the existence of the external world. And just thinking that this is possible is enough to send some people into an existential crisis, but enter Nick Bostrom, who popularized what's known as the simulation argument. Not just the idea that we could be living in a simulation, but the argument that we probably are. Bostrom does this by saying that humanity will inevitably be able to simulate human experience. If you look at technological progress, things like AI, it will be no time before we're able to comprehensively simulate entire worlds on our computers. But, says Bostrom, if these are true simulations of the world, then that world in the simulation will itself develop the ability to simulate worlds. And the world that they simulate, if a proper simulation, will itself be able to simulate worlds, and they'll be able to simulate worlds, and they'll be able to simulate worlds, and so on. So you have this sort of chain of simulated worlds, all beginning with the first world, which is the only one that's actually real and not simulated. And Bostrom says, what's more likely? That we happen to be in the very first real world, or that we're in one of the potentially billions or trillions of simulated realities? Just on sheer probability, we should think we're almost certainly in a simulation. For what it's worth, I'm not super convinced by this, mostly because I'm suspicious that we will ever be able to simulate human consciousness. That's a big topic, and perhaps one for another video, but I have had Nick Bostrom on my podcast, and we did talk about AI consciousness. I also have a whole video explaining the meaning of the evil demon and Descartes' famous phrase, "I think, therefore I am," all available in the description below. Next, why does anything exist? This is one of the most naive philosophical questions that anybody can ask. It's one of the first questions that anybody can ask, and one of the most profound. Why is there stuff? If you consider the possibility that there could have been nothing, it seems like there could have just never existed anything ever, and yet there's stuff. There are chairs, and there are trees, and there are minds, and there are colors, and there are all kinds of weird things. I mean, there may even be things called morals if you're a moral objectivist. There are all kinds of weird things that exist, either materially or immaterially. None of that had to be. And this can cause an existential crisis, I think, in two ways. Because when you start trying to answer this question, you might say, well, I guess it just exists for no reason and we'll never know, which is quite existentially troubling. But if you determine that there is some answer as to why anything exists, there's some reason that you've discovered, maybe it's because God created the world and designed it in this way, then you've introduced something like purpose, and purpose that's externally put upon you. And now you have this teleology in your life, whether you like it or not. So when you really reflect on the fact that there could have been nothing, but there is stuff, you're either going to be left with this really uncomfortable agnosticism about why you're here in the first place, or possibly land on an answer which might just revolutionize your entire life. Acknowledgement of death. Okay, this one's pretty straightforward. When you realize that you're going to die for the first time, it can be a little bit scary. Most people know they're going to die. Some people think they might be able to escape it. We'll see how that goes for them. But most people think that they are mortal. Fine, but when was the last time you really acknowledged it? I don't mean just accepted that it's true. I mean sat down for 20 minutes and thought about nothing other than your own mortality and really tried to comprehend what it means that one day you will not exist. I did this once when I was a teenager, and I don't think I've ever done it since, partly because it scared the absolute living shit out of me. These days I'm a little more agnostic about the nature of mind and the existence of God and the afterlife, and so I suppose that provides me with some comfort, but I must say that when it comes to existential crises, it doesn't get much more straightforward than realizing that your time is limited on this planet. Having said that, some people do think that the shortness of life is what gives it its meaning. They say that if life were infinitely long, then every day would be meaningless. It's like having infinite money in your bank account. What's $1 to you? It's meaningless. It has no value, essentially. Whereas if you've only got $100 in your bank account, then $1 can be quite a lot of money to you. So the acknowledgement of death may lead to an existential crisis, but it may also lead to a recognition of the very thing that gives life meaning in the first place. Okay, we're moving down a level. Sympathy is created by self-pity. I'll admit that I don't actually know exactly what this is getting at. I suspect it's something like the idea that our care for other people is actually only a derivative of our care for ourselves. Is it just some evolutionary wiring? And if it is evolutionary wiring, then why would it evolve? Surely evolution favors what will help me to survive, so why would I evolve a capacity for caring about other people? Oh, well, it must be that in some way caring about other people is good for me. That might be a true evolutionary account of how morality evolved, but it's not a very wholesome one, especially when you consider your love and care for your friends and realize that that might just be some kind of evolutionary trick. But like I say, I don't know if that's what this is actually getting at. It's just my best guess. Last Thursdayism. What on earth is that? Well, put simply, it is the supposition that the entire universe and everything in it was created last Thursday. That's it. Why would anyone believe this? Well, as far as I can tell, nobody actually does. It's more like a thought experiment, which is why maybe it doesn't belong on the existentialist iceberg. The idea is that you can't disprove that the universe was created last Thursday. It might have been, and all of your memories might just be an illusion that were created at the same time. So, okay, nobody really believes this, but why does the thought experiment exist? It generally comes up in two contexts. The first is this radical skepticism again, the idea that we can't justify some of even our most basic, fundamental philosophical beliefs. The second context is specifically young Earth creationism. This is a branch of Christianity that believes the universe is about 6,000 years old. Now, one of the great mysteries for the young Earth creationist is the existence of really old stuff. Like really old stuff, millions of years old type stuff. Things like mountains or fossils. These are much older than 6,000 years old, so how does the young Earth creationist account for them? Well, enter the so-called omphalos hypothesis, the idea that God created the world 6,000 years ago, but with the appearance of old age. Why would he do this? Well, your guess is as good as mine, but some suggestions include the functionality of the world. It needs things like mountains, and so God created them looking really old. But also, it could be a religious test. God knew that one day humanity would evolve secular science, and it would start telling us evil things like the earth is older than 6,000 years old. So God put these things here to test us, to make sure that we'll stay faithful even in the face of opposite evidence. Whatever the reason for people believing in this apparent age hypothesis, Last Thursdayism is kind of a parody of this to show how ridiculous it sounds and how ridiculous it is. Therefore, I think it could be existential crisis inducing in the context of radical skepticism, but no more than something like the simulation theory, so I don't really know why it's this low down. If you want a healthy brain, you need a healthy diet. And that is where today's sponsor, AG1, can help. AG1 is a daily health drink, a blend of over 70 vitamins, minerals, and other ingredients, including gut-friendly bacteria, antioxidants, high-quality mushrooms, and more. As I've been trying to improve my physical health, AG1 has been a crucial...
Check out his video and very much think you should go and support him. Alex O'Connor.
You are alone in your brain. If you're a materialist, where are you? Like, where do you exist? You're probably kind of the same thing as your brain. You are your brain, in effect. But where's your brain? Well, it's kind of locked away inside of your skull, just sitting there in the dark. I mean, we have sense data, we have our eyes to see and our ears to hear, but that's just going through nerves and being translated by our brain. It's essentially an illusion. I mean, your eyes actually see things upside down and your brain flips it over again. And you don't directly engage with sound. A vibration hits your eardrum and sends a signal down a nerve which gets translated by your brain into an experience. But when you think about it, you're actually quite disconnected from it all. You're sort of like a person locked in a control room. You've got a big monitor and there are cameras outside so you can see the world, and there are speakers and microphones so you can hear everything that's going on too, but you're locked in that room and there's no way for you to get out. And if one day the monitor turned off and the microphone stopped working, you would just be sat there alone in the dark. And I suppose the scary thing is you are in that situation right now. It's just that the monitor is switched on and the microphones are still working, at least for now. We are not alone. It would be pretty scary if there were aliens out there, not least because they might attack us for literally any reason, but also because it should revolutionize our view of life. Firstly, for the religious, the idea that humans are special and that God created the universe with us in mind would be shattered in an instant. But also all kinds of philosophy about humanity and what it means to be a conscious agent as opposed to other animals would be radically altered by alien life. But for someone like me, I don't know if this is super existential, I might have put it a bit higher on the list. Afterlife skepticism. If you believe in God and you believe in the afterlife, then you are pretty consoled throughout most of your life that although your friends are dying, you're going to see them again. And although you're going to die one day, you don't need to worry because you're going to be somewhere better and you're going to be with all your friends again. But then you start questioning it. Does it really exist, or is it just a fantasy we've come up with for the purposes of consoling ourselves? That can definitely give you some existential dread, especially if it's the first time you've encountered the idea. However, many people get along just fine not knowing. I suppose if you knew that there were no afterlife and your skepticism went all the way in that regard, then this would be pretty existential, but we've already done the acknowledgement of death thing, so I don't know why this would be lower down on the iceberg. Okay, we submerge to the next level and we start with nihilism. Nihilism is sort of the crown jewel of existentialism. In many ways, it's the result of an existential crisis rather than the cause of one. When you start questioning these things, is there an afterlife? Maybe not. Oh, I'm definitely going to die one day. Oh, I don't know why I'm here. The result of this is to think, nothing matters. And even if something does matter, I have absolutely no way to work out what it is, and I've tried, but I can't get there, so I'm just going to give up all hope in that project. So nihilism is broadly the view that nothing matters, that there are no objective values. There are sort of different kinds of nihilism. You can be an epistemological nihilist, or just a moral nihilist, or like a broad nihilist about everything. But I think this all-encompassing, nothing matters in any context, is what people tend to think of when they think of a nihilist. I understand why it's here, but like I say, the other things on this list cause existential crises. This seems to me more the result of one. We are alone. A controversial choice, putting it below we are not alone. There's that famous quote by Arthur C. Clarke: two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe, or we are not. Both are equally terrifying. The author of this chart has decided that they're not equally terrifying, and us being alone is more scary than us not being alone. I don't know about this. Let me know what you think in the comments. If we are alone in the universe, then we're forced to contend with this image of us sort of being on this rock, floating around in cold space, and it does all feel a bit scary and isolated. But I will also say that if in this entire incredible universe there's only one place where life evolved, I think that counts as some evidence towards theism. I mean, if life just evolves spontaneously, we rightfully ask the question, as Fermi famously did, where is everyone? If life can just spontaneously evolve on planets, then given the abundance of life-permitting planets in the universe, where are they? However, if the entire universe was created with the express intention of permitting human life on planet Earth, that mystery sort of disappears. It's of course replaced with the mystery of why the universe would need to be so big in the first place, but I've discussed this in depth with my friend Joe Foley from Unsolicited Advice, and that was in a podcast titled 7 Questions Atheists Cannot Answer. But I don't know, what do you think? What would be more scary, us being alone or us not being alone? Okay, next, being born before immortality. I think this is getting at the idea that as science advances, many people believe we might one day be able to overcome death itself. And this day being, of course, in the future, and maybe the near future, we might well be living in the last mortal age. So it kind of feels a little bit unfair that maybe our grandchildren will get to live forever, but we, just because we happen to be born before the scientific developments that made it possible, will not get to live forever. There are a few problems with this, if you ask me. One is that I'm not sure if science will one day overcome death, but when it comes to immortality, materially speaking, I just don't think this is possible. Even if we develop the technology to avoid death on planet Earth, one day the sun is going to eat the Earth, and maybe if we've escaped the Earth by then, that planet will one day die, and wherever we've spread to, that planet will one day die too, and eventually the universe is going to come to some kind of end, whether it be a big freeze or a heat death or whatever. It's not the kind of environment in which I think conscious experience and materially existing human beings even can obtain. But also, even if that were possible, would you want to live immortally in this heat death or big freeze universe? It doesn't sound super attractive to me, and so the idea that I'm born before immortality is actually pretty consoling. Deeper we plunge. Dual consciousness theory. Okay, this is a fun one. Dual consciousness theory is, broadly speaking, the idea that 2 consciousnesses can exist in one brain. How can this happen? Well, one way is as the result of a surgery called a corpus callosotomy. Your brain, as you probably know, is split into 2 hemispheres, and these hemispheres are connected by a group of fibers called the corpus callosum, and this allows, as well as impedes, communication between your 2 hemispheres. A corpus callosotomy is the severing or partial severing of the corpus callosum, and this is most commonly done as a treatment for extreme cases of epilepsy. When the corpus callosum is severed, communication between the 2 hemispheres is disrupted. Now, they can still communicate to a limited degree through other means, but we do sometimes begin to see some weird things happening. In 1908, it was reported that there was a woman whose left hand would sometimes attack her. Her left hand would grab her throat and try to strangle her and require her to use her right hand and the rest of her body to fight it off. Since then, there have been many documented cases of this so-called alien hand syndrome, where somebody's limb can do something completely contrary to their will and seem to have a mind of its own. This isn't always dangerous, but it can result in people, for instance, pouring out a cup of coffee on the floor that they've just brewed. Or in some cases, one hand might be trying to put on clothes to start the day, whereas the other hand then goes to take them off because it wants to stay in bed or something. This is an extremely interesting, but of course also horrifying condition for a person to live with, and it's best documented in cases where somebody has undergone a corpus callosotomy. Now, you may know that the right hemisphere of your brain broadly controls your left arm, and the left hemisphere of your brain broadly controls your right arm. And so if the hemispheres aren't communicating with each other, it might make sense that your arms would start wanting to do different things. And this is seen by some as supportive evidence that, at least in cases of split brain patients, like those who've undergone a corpus callosotomy, that there are 2 consciousnesses sort of in battle with each other in this one human brain. I recorded a podcast earlier this year with Ian McGilchrist, author of The Master and His Emissary, which is about the 2 hemispheres of the brain and how they kind of do different things and have different ways of approaching the world. So even if it might be most obvious in split brain patients, it might still be the case that there are 2 consciousnesses within you. You just don't notice it as much because your corpus callosum is allowing them to communicate with each other and work in harmony. And this got me thinking about those split brain patients. If you have alien hand syndrome and your left hand is trying to do something and you have no idea what it's doing and can't control it, if this is the result of 2 consciousnesses, then you're only aware of the one that doesn't want the hand to be moving. So where is the consciousness that does want to move the hand? Is it sort of trapped somewhere without any ability to speak or communicate? The split brain patients have this consciousness within them that's controlling that alien hand, but it can't get out through the mouth or any other means of communication. Is that alien hand trying to tell us something? I don't want to think about it. Observation creates the universe. Okay, it's generally thought that the material world around us exists whether we're here to observe it or not. But some people think that the universe only exists because of our observation or because of our minds sort of creating it. I suppose the person to reference here is George Berkeley and his philosophy of idealism. This is the view that there are no material objects, there's no material world. The only thing that exists are ideas in people's minds. I don't have the time or the expertise to go into George Berkeley's philosophy in depth here, but the basic idea is that the universe is kind of created by the mind, or is an idea or set of ideas within the mind. And the idea that the universe is created by observation suffers from a similar objection to George Berkeley's worldview. That objection is this: if the universe only exists because it's being observed, suppose I light a candle and then I leave the room. An hour later, I come back into the room and the candle has melted. But if the universe only exists insofar as it's being observed, how is this possible? If the candle only exists if it's being observed, then when I left the room, it should have ceased to exist. And when I came back, it might have started to exist again, but it should be in the same state that I left it. It has to have existed in the meantime in order to have melted. But how does it exist if the universe is created by observation? In the context of George Berkeley, he had a very straightforward answer to this. Well, the candle is still being observed when you leave the room, just not by you. It's being observed by someone else. Can you guess who? So George Berkeley's idealism is, at least in his view, a novel proof for the existence of God. God is the ultimate observer who creates the universe. Now, I think that if you believe the universe is created by observation, then you do suffer from this objection a little bit, and maybe are led into the hands of this argument for God's existence. So in the context of the existential crisis iceberg, well, this might be something that doesn't cause an existential crisis. It might actually solve one, because it leads you right into the hands of an argument for the existence of God. Mystery of consciousness. Well, consciousness is the most mysterious and yet familiar thing in the world. We know absolutely nothing about it, and yet we cannot perceive anything except through it. I've spoken about this a lot, so I won't go into detail here, but that's kind of the existential part, the idea that this fundamental thing about our experience, the very window through which we perceive the world or are able to think at all, is something so foreign to us that we don't even understand the mechanism by which it works. Not only that, but we don't even seem close to coming up with a solution to the mystery of consciousness. So the thing that's most fundamental to our experience as sentient human beings is a complete and utter and impenetrable mystery to us. How fun. Okay, next level, deeper we plunge. Past and future exist simultaneously. The most common view of time is the so-called A theory of time. A theory states that the present is all that exists. Time genuinely flows, the past is no more, and the future is yet to be. But there's also the B theory of time. This suggests that past, future, and present all exist on something like a time block, and that we're sort of perceiving one part of the time block, and that's what we call the present. On this view, things like objects or people don't have 3 dimensions, they have 4 dimensions. They actually have 4 dimensions right now. They have a dimension left to right, forward to back, up to down, but also past to future. So the past version of you from 5 minutes ago is as much a part of you now as the left-hand side of your body is. Likewise, future you is a part of you. It's a bit like if I could only see my left hand and my right hand was behind my back. I can't see it, but it's still very much there. This will have all kinds of implications. For example, free will. If your future self kind of already exists, can you really have any choice in what it does? But also it gives us reason to doubt our intuitions, because intuitively we do travel through time. Intuitively the past doesn't exist anymore. But if the B theory of time is correct, we have to abandon that intuition, which tells us that the way that we initially view the world is often philosophically completely and utterly wrong. Now, I find this interesting, but not particularly existential, at least not compared to the other stuff we've been talking about, so I'm a bit surprised to find it this low down, but maybe I've just misunderstood what the author is getting at. And if the author is watching this video, then, well, let me know. Okay, everybody's heard of determinism, right? Well, get ready for superdeterminism. What is superdeterminism? Well, normal store-bought determinism is the view that everything happens in accordance with a determined chain of events. If you could know the direction and speed of every atom in the universe, then in principle you could predict everything that's going to happen in the future with 100% accuracy. It's a little bit like how when you flip a coin, it feels random, but if you actually knew all of the physical conditions of the coin, you could predict with 100% accuracy whether it would be heads or tails. Determinism says that the whole universe works in this way. Things seem to be subject to chance, but actually they're not at all. Now, you may have noticed that any time you ever bring up this subject ever to anybody, the very first thing they say is, what about quantum physics? Everybody's heard that quantum physics involves some element of randomness, that electrons don't actually exist in one place or another, but there's some kind of wave of probability, and that there's actually a lot of chance going on at the most micro level of our universe. Well, sure, yeah, maybe. No one knows for certain what's going on down there. But there is this view called superdeterminism, which, as far as I understand, is sort of like determinism but applied to quantum physics. I'm not a physicist, so I'm kind of the wrong person to ask, but as far as I understand, superdeterminism allows us to do things like retain the actual reality of particles rather than having these quantum probability clouds. If you want to learn more, there are some great YouTube videos on the subject, including by people like Sabine Hossenfelder or Arvin Ash. Those two, I think, actually have differing views on the matter, so it may be worth checking both of them out, although I'm not sure because, again, I don't fully understand all of this stuff. But basically, I think that what's going on with superdeterminism is the removal of randomness even at the quantum level. Why would this cause an existential crisis? Maybe because of free will. If somebody believes in free will, the idea that the universe is determined can be a big problem for their worldview. I mean, if the way everything is going to go is completely determined from the Big Bang, then you can't really be said to be in control of the future of your own actions. So a lot of people take refuge in the idea that no, there is some randomness in the universe, it's not all determined. I think this is totally misguided. I'm just going to be blunt here, because randomness is something which, by definition, you're not in control of either. If something happens truly randomly, it's part of the definition of random that you didn't have some determinate cause in making it occur. Now, in my experience, when I've argued that free will doesn't exist, people often do bring up quantum randomness as a kind of retort. So I understand why superdeterminism would cause an existential crisis for these people, but to be honest, the existential crisis should have been there anyway, because of course, even if there is randomness in the universe, you're not in control of it. Human life is a momentarily universal anomaly. I think that's supposed to say a momentary universal anomaly. That is to say that in the course of the universe, something like human life or conscious existence is an anomaly. It's a sort of accidental flash that will come and it will go, and the universe will go on mindlessly for the rest of eternity. It's a bit like that clip from True Detective where Matthew McConaughey's character, Rust, I think his name is, I haven't seen the show, is in a car talking about how human consciousness is some kind of cosmic accident and he's being all nihilistic about it. I think that's kind of the thought that's supposed to be captured here. And obviously, if we are just some kind of cosmic accident, that's not the most existentially fulfilling revelation in the world, so I can understand why it would be on this list. But again, maybe I've misunderstood what it's getting at. Going deeper now, we are underneath the iceberg. The brain creates the flow of time. To be honest, I find this difficult to separate from the previous idea of the past and future existing simultaneously, because if the past and the future exist simultaneously, then where does time come from? It's got to be an illusion of the mind, so I think it's kind of similar to that. Boltzmann brain. Oh boy. One way to think about a Boltzmann brain is to consider that over an infinite amount of time, extremely unlikely things are guaranteed to happen. If the universe existed for an infinite amount of time and there were just atoms floating around everywhere, then given that it's infinite, these atoms would form spontaneous structures and then dissolve, and every structure that you could possibly think of that can be made of atoms would at some point exist. The second law of thermodynamics says that entropy will always increase over time, and entropy is the amount of order or lack of order in a system. In practice, this means that if I spray an aerosol can over on this side of the room, particles will be released and they'll be on this side of the room, but given enough time, they'll spread across the room, and eventually they'll be spread evenly across the room. Why does this happen? Well, because atoms are randomly vibrating in different directions, and given enough time, they just happen probabilistically to spread out evenly. But we are just talking about probability here. It's not impossible, in principle, for all of those particles that came from that aerosol can that are spread across the room to just spontaneously come together and jump into a water bottle sat on a table over there. It's just so unimaginably unlikely that we can basically treat it as a law that that's never going to happen. But suppose you had an infinitely existing universe. When you have an infinite amount of time, unlikely events aren't just probably going to happen, they're definitely going to happen. It's a bit like the monkeys on the typewriters. Given enough time, they'll produce the works of Shakespeare. It's not clear that would actually happen in that example, but you get the point. Randomness over an infinite amount of time is such that even the most extremely unlikely events will happen. In fact, they'll happen over and over and over again, because we're talking about an infinite amount of time here. So the realization that Boltzmann, of Boltzmann brain fame, had was that in this infinite universe where everything that could be made of atoms is made, sometimes brains will spontaneously form. Brains are just made of atoms after all, and everything does get made. And what's more, brains can spontaneously exist with a bunch of false memories. A little bit like the simulation or last Thursdayism, the idea that brains can have fake memories of the past. Well, sure, I mean, memories are just brain activity, and that's just made of atoms. So there will be brains that spontaneously exist with a bunch of false perceptions and false memories as a matter of certainty in an infinite universe of atoms bumping around with each other. And given the fact that these spontaneously existing brains with fake memories are going to happen much more commonly than actual brains evolved in the traditional way, requiring the evolution of galaxies and stars and planets and simple life and the evolution into human life and the evolution of consciousness and all of this kind of stuff, right? If you want to create a real brain with real memories, all of that needs to happen. And that's got a much lower state of entropy than just the brain spontaneously coming into existence. Now, of course, that less likely state of affairs will still happen. Remember, everything happens in an infinite amount of time, but it will just happen much less. So in this infinite universe of atoms bumping into each other, there will be far more of these brains, which are known now as Boltzmann brains, than there would be real brains with real experiences. And just like with the simulation argument, we have to ask, what's more likely? That you're one of these real brains with real memories, or that you're one of these much more common Boltzmann brains? And if you are a Boltzmann brain, what does that mean? It means that you, right now, are just a spontaneous arrangement of atoms in an infinite universe that at any moment is about to disassemble and you will exist no more. So ultimately, this is another kind of radical skepticism. It's a little bit more sort of sciencey, so it seems to have a bit more weight behind it, but you'll have noticed that this relies heavily on the idea that there is an infinite past of atoms bumping into each other according to the same laws of thermodynamics that exist in our universe, which appears to be a finite universe which started 13.8 billion years ago. Of course, maybe our universe is just one of many. Maybe something came before the Big Bang and maybe it stretches infinitely back into the past, but there's no reason to think that atoms would vibrate and move in the same way. So I think that the philosophical and scientific evidence that the universe is not in fact infinite is enough to do away with this hypothesis. But again, I am no expert on science. I'm just a lowly YouTuber, so if I have got this horribly wrong, please go easy on me in the comments. Okay, now we're at the bottom. We're at the depths of the depths, and we're dealing with quantum immortality. There is an interpretation of quantum mechanics put forward by Hugh Everett called the many worlds interpretation. This suggests that when quantum events occur, every possible outcome actually happens, and that the universe kind of splits into different realities, each of which plays out a different possible outcome. Again, I have a full podcast episode on this topic, this time with David Deutsch, a fervent believer in the quantum multiverse. If you're interested, a link is down below. But take, for example, Schrödinger's cat. A quantum event determines whether a cat will die or live, and until you open the box, the cat is both dead and alive at the same time. The many worlds interpretation says that there are simply two branching realities, one in which the cat lives and one in which the cat dies, but they both actually happen. They're just different branches of reality that then just continue on independently of each other. So now we can consider a slightly dark thought experiment known as quantum suicide. Imagine the Schrödinger's cat setup, but instead of the cat, it's you. There's a button that you can press which through the same quantum mechanism has a 50% chance of killing you and a 50% chance of letting you live. You press the button and you're still alive. Okay, lucky you. You press the button again. You're still alive. You press the button again and again and again and again and again. Is this thing on? You're still alive. Either the machine must be broken or you have beaten incredible odds. I mean, every single time you press that button, the likelihood of your survival decreases to vanishingly small proportions. So suppose you press the button 100 times, 1,000 times, 500,000 times, and you're still alive. What would that tell us? Well, some people suggest it would tell us that the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is true. If other interpretations are correct, and there's a probability of outcomes, and by pressing the button you realize one of them, it shouldn't take very long for you to die. Whereas if it's the case that every single possible outcome does happen in some reality, then consider this. Every time you press the button, two branches of reality are created, one in which you live and one in which you die. Now, which one of those branches does your conscious experience go down? That is, from your perspective, which of those branches do you end up in? Well, it kind of has to go down the one in which you remain alive. It can't go down the one in which you die because you're dead. There's no you for that conscious experience to continue in. Therefore, every time you press the button, your consciousness has to go down the branch of reality in which you survive. At least in this thought experiment, subjectively speaking, you can't die. I mean, there'll be many versions of you in different branches of reality which do die, but your consciousness is going to follow that branch where you stay alive. Thus, on the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, quantum immortality. And actually, the final entry on this iceberg, you cannot die from your perspective, I think is essentially getting at the same thing. One biographer of Everett states that, quote, Everett firmly believed that his many worlds theory guaranteed him immortality. His consciousness, he argued, is bound at each branching to follow whatever path does not lead to death. So what I was saying a moment ago about your consciousness always following the branch in which you stay alive, this biographer is suggesting Everett believed this about life in general, that you will always escape your death because there will always be a quantum reality in which you survived, and that's where your consciousness will go. Not just in this convoluted thought experiment, but just in life as a whole. Now, I don't know if Everett actually thought this is just one biographer's opinion, but it's an interesting thought. One interesting fact about quantum suicide is that it can only ever verify the many worlds interpretation. It can't falsify it. It can't prove it false, because in order to prove it false, the person doing the experiment would have to die. So if you keep on living, you can prove the theory might be true, but you can't prove with this experiment that it's false, because this would involve dying first. It also has to be you that does the experiment. You could get somebody else to press that button for you, but if you watch them die in front of you, all you know is you're in the branch of reality in which they died. You don't know where their consciousness has gone. The only person who can ever know the result of the experiment is the person doing the experiment. Another biographer of Everett, Wikipedia tells me, Peter Byrne, says that Everett also privately discussed quantum suicide, that is this weird thought experiment that we've just been talking about, but adds that, quote, it is unlikely, however, that Everett subscribed to this quantum immortality view, as the only sure thing it guarantees is that the majority of your copies will die. Hardly a rational goal. I don't know about that, because it seems to me that the point is that, yeah, lots of copies of you will die, but the one that retains your conscious experience will always be the one that remains alive. Hey, it's not super convincing, but neither are many of the other attempts at immortality that humans have come up with in the past. Now, this is at the bottom of the existential crisis iceberg. For a lot of people, the idea of living forever would be great news. But of course, it's also true that many people are terrified of the prospect of immortality. So if we've got no choice in the matter and we're all quantumly immortal whether we like it or not, for some people that's good news. For some people that's bad news. And hey, to rehearse one overused, famous YouTuber-y motto, let me know what you think down in the comments. So that's the existentialist iceberg. I may have got some of them wrong. I may have got most of them wrong. If you think that I did, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
All right. So, yeah, that was from, excuse me here. That was from Alex O'Connor. Here's a link to the video. And here is a link to his website where you can find out more. He's got philosophy, religion, ethics, and politics. As you can see, that was quite the extensive discussion. Boy, covered a lot. If anyone has any questions, otherwise I'll just go through some of these. Sonder, the realization that everyone around you has a complex life. Thing there, the point that he made is the idea that we are side characters in everyone else's reality. Then the next idea was the simulation theory, where, the idea we're in the Matrix. Then there's radical skepticism that he talked about, which is, if it can be questioned, then it should. Big question, why does anything exist? There could be nothing, but there's something. I know many people have different ideas about that. I tend to agree with the more scientific version of how we got here, which is, I'm trying to remember, abiogenesis, followed by I'm trying to remember what it's called. Quantum, no. Abiogenesis, how life came to arise, followed by evolution, how we became humans, and I'm trying to think of it. Solar. It's basically the idea of how stars form and planets form. Take those ideas together, pretty much. Poof, we're here. Okay, acknowledgement of death. What does it mean if you do not exist? Yeah, there's an interesting thought experiment. I know what I'm hoping to do with these videos and things is to provide, I don't know, some kind of roadmap of how to get where I am without going through all the pain that I had to go to. I guess that's what I'm trying to do. Okay. Going to sympathy is created by self-pity. So, interesting idea. Sympathy. The idea that I feel sorry for someone else because of me. Kind of that idea. The idea that another idea, the universe was created last Thursday. Everything was created, including memories, which is the Omphalos hypothesis, I believe. Then the next idea he went to, you're alone in your brain, just trapped in a room. A bunch of sensors, your brain in a vat. I tend to think of that as not just a brain in the vat, but the entire body. I think I'm trying to think of guy does impact theory. He has a saying: "You are having a biological experience, and it just isn't your brain, entire body." Then we had the idea we are not alone. Yeah, I can't remember the formula, but there was a formula put forward by calculate the number of possible life planets that contain life in the universe, and it's somewhere between 1 and a billion, several billion, 100 billion, who knows? So, somewhere. Which is true? I don't know. Hey. Afterlife skepticism. Well, the only thing that I can imagine about the afterlife is it'll be exactly the same as I remember before I was born. That's what I'm expecting. Same thing as before I was born. Then was the idea of nihilism. Nothing matters in any context. This, boy, I had a hard time with this one. Because when you take the idea that, the universe is going to continue on long after humanity is gone, most likely. and every building, monument, thought, idea, all of it will disappear in time. So that idea, coupled with generally how difficult life is day by day, I'm trying to think. Now can't remember the philosopher that came up with. I'm trying to think. Absurdism is what it's called, and absurdism basically says that we are stuck continuously rolling a large boulder up a hill that is magically going to roll down to the bottom every time we get it to the top. And we have to push the stone up the hill for our entire existence. So, and it's modeled after the story of Sisyphus. So his idea was that, yeah, you got to push the stone. So pick a good stone to push and have fun. That's it. That's the philosophy. Push a stone, pick a good one, have fun. Hey, next idea was we are alone. Interesting conclusion that he had there. We are alone. There's a strong case for theism. Interesting. That's an interesting idea because then it would prove the universe is created for us. Which, yeah, I kind of don't think so. All right. Next idea, being born before immortality, the last mortal age. Well, would that be a good thing? Well, I know for myself, it would be tempting to go for a while. I'd like to see what's coming in the future, but yeah, I think I would get very discouraged if life lasted forever. Okay, and his next topic was dual consciousness theory. People have corpus callosomy, or whatever it was, callosum, where it's treatment for extreme epilepsy, and you wind up with two consciousness, one controlling an alien hand. Interesting idea. Where is that consciousness? Don't know. Then there's the idea observation creates the universe. George Berkeley, ideaism. Then there's the mystery of consciousness. Well, I don't think there's still a mystery. Although, because we are having a biological experience, there are some things that we can do to aid us in being better humans, I guess. Past and future exist at the same time. I mean, maybe. Depends on how true determinism is. But my experience, and maybe it's fake aid, my experience, but that does not seem to be true to me. Super determinism. Um, I have a hard time believing that we do not have free will. I have a hard time believing that. I mean, I do recognize determinism and how it operates, but I think I don't know, there was another philosopher that I was watching that had the idea we may not have free will, but we have free won't, which is the idea that yes, our brain can come up with stuff, but we can say no, we don't want to do that. Then there's the idea that he had human life is an anomaly. Again, time will bear that out, but I suspect just because we've been able to find so much water all over the place in the universe that we're not alone. So, his next point was Boltzmann brains. Over for amount of time, anything can exist, including brains that have false memories. And that's because there's less, well, what did he call? Less entropy in Boltzmann brains suddenly appearing at a randomness than there is entire solar systems and planets and everything forming and things evolving have real brains. It's much easier to just have a brain floating around somewhere. And yeah, it's kind of the same ideas as the Matrix and other ones. Similar idea, just a little different. Quantum immortality. All possible outcomes happen. Branching realities. Consciousness follows the path where you are alive. Cannot be proved false. So when something can't be proved false, it's kind of skeptical whether it's true or not. So, hey. And the other one, you cannot die from your perspective. Interesting. I guess it would be just like before I was born. What was that like? You remember? Probably not. So, that is the shoe. Hopefully, we've spread some new ideas for you to think about. If you like the show, I probably should have a. I should probably have a thing with my URL. Maybe I'll do that right now. I'll see it get up. Hold on. We do live daily at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we are at twitch.tv/Tribe of Menzor. There we go. As well as on our YouTube channels, X. Yeah, there we go. Maybe we'll turn that on. There we go. Don't forget to, if you're watching on YouTube, to like and subscribe. And we will say good night. We'll see you tomorrow. Oh, let's take a look at the schedule again. Boo, 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 boo. Boop. You ever hit something and it doesn't do what you think? And you go, why did you do that? I don't know. Okay. So tomorrow we are looking at Master masculine vulnerability, attract women or repel them by your wingman. It's I'm trying to think of her name, Angela. Really good, awesome creator. And on Tuesday we're gonna take a look at Russia's population problem in our Take Over the World, Women's Truth, Duty, Sex, Redefined for a Successful Marriage, a Happy Wife, School, Relationship, Truth, the 3 requirements, a good relationship by the School of Life. Or Friday we'll have a recap. Saturday will be a Science Truth, the 4 quadrants. The 4 quadrants, a map of all knowledge and human experience by the Living Philosophy. And then Friday or Sunday, next Sunday, we're going to watch a video about a very interesting dude. And we're going to put forward the argument that remembering best efforts is what we should be doing instead of getting rid of all of our cultural heroes, instead of destroying them because they made some mistake. Yeah. So we are trying to believe what is most. Gee, I can't. I can't. 6 p.m. CST daily. Woo! Yeah. All right. We're going to go and say good night. Let me see here. Da-da-da-da. Oh, that's going to be loud. Yeah, I never remember. Yeah, I remembered. I turned it down first. Of course, I turned down my mic instead of the music. All right. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Wow, look at my hair. Oh, well. All right. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Hey, man. Hey, that sign's not in the right place. Can I move that? Hey. There. Hey, that's better. All right. Like this song. Have a good one, and we will see you tomorrow.